my brain goes to like 3 P's. We've got our packaging, we've got our product, and then we've got our purpose. And it's got to go in that order, right? Because if we think about this crowded retail shelf, how are we driving trial? How are we capturing the attention? It's not the deliciousness of the product. It's not what's in the packaging itself. We've got to get them to make that initial purchase. That has to happen with packaging, right? In the retail environment, that has to happen with clear, compelling packaging.
Welcome to Brands for a Better World, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the people and products building a more just, healthy, and regenerative future for us all. Tune in weekly, and together, we'll learn about why these better products and brands were created, how they're helping fix broken systems, and what you can do to support them. My hope is that you'll discover some new brands to love and get some sparks of inspiration that will help you live your best life. Hi, I'm your host, Gage Mitchell, founder of Modern Species, a sustainable brand design agency helping better brands grow to scale their impact. If you like this show, please help it grow by leaving ratings and reviews on your podcast app and by sharing your favorite episodes with your friends. Maybe this will be one of them. On this episode, I'm sharing a recent LinkedIn Live conversation I had with Alli Ball, founder and CEO of Biz Wiz and creator of the Retail Ready course, about what mission-driven claims and attributes retailers and consumers are looking for in brands, what happens when a founder is overly invested in their mission, where mission fits in the brand loyalty funnel, and more. Enjoy.
My name is Alli Ball. I'm the founder and CEO of Biz Wiz and the creator of the Retail Ready program. I'm a former grocery buyer turned wholesale consultant, and my team and I help emerging food, beverage, and taxable grocery brands develop sales systems, understand how to land on retail shelves, and how to have high sales once you're there. I've been doing this on my own at Biz Wiz for the past 10 years. And now Retail Ready is the only way that we work with brands. So I spend all day, every day, thinking about sales and wholesale strategy and how the heck are we going to get more better for you brands on retail shelves. So that's me. I live in San Francisco with my dog and my husband, and really excited to be here.
Love it. And just maybe for a little extra context, when you did work in retail, were you in charge of a certain category or the kind of whole store and got a purview of everything?
Yeah, great question. Okay, when I started in retail, I was at Buy Right Market here in San Francisco, where I still work.
An amazing store, of course.
Where I still live and work. Yeah, amazing, really amazing store. And back when I first started with them, it was a single location. It was Buy Right 18th Street. And I was a grocery buyer there and in charge of many categories in grocery. Some of my favorites were coffee, chocolate, dry grocery, dairy. Oh my goodness. I did all like the milk, eggs, butter purchasing, which was really fun. Oil and vinegar, confections. I mean, gosh, so many categories. And in that role, my job was figuring out what products we were going to sell and where we were going to merchandise, how to do pricing and all of that. And back then, Buy Right was really known, I mean, still is, but really known for being a place of discovery. And so oftentimes I was working with brands who didn't have any wholesale presence before getting on the shelves at Buy Right. Wow. So in that role, I acted almost as an in-house consultant, helping young brands understand what it was going to take to develop this wholesale relationship and what it was going to take to expand beyond the walls of Buy Right. And so I did that for years and years. And then we opened up Buy Right Divisadero, which is about 3 miles away, the second location of Buy Right. That was in 2013, and I became head of grocery and store manager there. So in that, I was overseeing the entire grocery department. That was about 3,500 SKUs. And yeah, it was wild. That store, we did 35 million in sales in the first year. And yeah, it's wild. I mean, it's a store that's 3,500 square feet, right? It's tiny, tiny, tiny. All things considered, tiny in the world
compared to giant supermarkets, right?
Yeah, exactly. I need to go back and fact check this, but we had some crazy stat where we were doing more revenue per square foot than the average Apple store. And so like we were just like, things were flying off the shelf.
Wow.
But in that role, and I think this is important in our conversation, my focus shifted. It shifted away from working directly with producers and more towards the financial health of my department, financial health of the store. And so in that, my head was in, spreadsheets and looking at the P&L week in and week out and thinking about our budgets and all of that, which was incredible. It was really eye-opening to get that financial education. But also I missed working with brands. I missed the impact that I had working directly with brands. And so I left Bi-Rite 10 years ago and launched into my consulting career. And for the first few years, I split my time between working with brands and also working with retailers across the US. And so helping develop, grocery buying systems, category management systems, category reviews, inventory management, merchandising, all of that. And so it was really, again, really eye-opening to see retail beyond the walls of Bi-Rite and get a sense of, what was different across the country, what was happening in other retailers as I built up the producer side of our Retail Ready program.
Right. And all that just gives you so much good experience, like you said, working with brands who'd never been in retail before and seeing what questions they have or how prepared or unprepared they were. And then seeing from your end, the retail side, what motivations maybe you needed to keep an eye out for in terms of like what's going to sell with your consumers, what your demographic that comes to that specific store might buy versus a different location, how much shelf space you actually have to put these products on there, like just all sorts of stuff like that.
Oh my
and then
goodness.
your other role of like managing the whole store, not just one department. Then you're seeing like how the whole business works and how the maybe departments play off each other or seasonality of the store, stuff like that.
And even thinking about things like, okay, I've got these really incredible, I'll just say a really incredible like croutons, and I know they're great for salads. How can I cross merchandise them in the produce department, like the dry produce department, without taking away from produce's physical space? And like, what is more profitable, the croutons that I want to put in dry produce or garlic that the produce buyer is really pushing for on that shelf? And so it's really this delicate dance in a way of figuring out what goes in every inch of the store and how is it going to contribute to that category or that buyer's objectives. It's wild. Retail's wild.
And that just I have so many follow-up questions I want to ask, but I also know that people probably are tuning in to hear specifically about Mission Meets Retail. So I'm going to hold all my back end of the store questions for a moment. And for anyone who doesn't know me tuning in, maybe you came through Alli's following. My name is Gage Mitchell. I'm the founder and creative director of Modern Species, which is a impact-driven brand agency. We focus on helping better for the world brands grow so that it can scale their impact. And we work primarily in food and beverage. And the agency's been doing this for 15 years. So on our end, we come with a lot of expertise around the mission side. How are you communicating your mission? And when I say mission, I know every business has a mission, of course, right? But that mission is basically your strategy for executing on your goals or whatever, right? But what I mean by mission at this moment is if you have a purpose-driven company that's trying to make the world a better place and bring about some vision for a better world, then your mission is the strategy by which you're going about doing that. So when I'm talking about mission, I'm talking about the brands who are trying to make better for you, better for the world products. And how are they communicating that to the consumers, to the retailers, to industry partners, to the press, to the media, et cetera, to make it clear and compelling? Like that's what we focus on. And then we kind of build a brand around that. So that's the expertise I'm bringing. And as Alli mentioned, her retail expertise. Just for clarification for anyone tuning in terms of like when we say retail, Alli, can you talk about what context you mean retail in? Because I know in this world we're living in an omni-channel world. So what will we be talking about today in terms of retail? Yeah.
So I primarily think about retail as brick and mortar. Let me back up for a second. So the name of our program is Retail Ready. And I really should have called it Wholesale Ready. But that name just isn't as exciting.
Yeah. Doesn't ring.
It doesn't have the same ring to it. So when I think about, I use the word retail and wholesale a bit interchangeably. But for this conversation, let's talk about retail as in traditional brick and mortar stores of any size. Could be specialty, could be, the bigger players looking at Whole Foods or Kroger's or Costco's of the world. And they might have some sort of e-commerce component, right? Click and collect. They might have a shipping component, but it's all still wholesale. So you have to convince a wholesale buyer, a category buyer, to carry your products and put them on their shelves, whether that's a physical shelf or a digital shelf. So does that make sense in this context? We'll talk about wholesale, but really through the eyes of retail.
Right. So it's basically anything but D2C, because we're talking about you have to convince somebody else to sell your product, right?
Exactly. Let's leave D2C aside. I've got thoughts there, but maybe we'll put that aside. And let's also leave food service aside, because that's a whole other thing.
Okay.
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
And we'll leave Amazon aside for now. We might there's some overlaps here, but let's try to stay a bit focused on more traditional retail.
Right.
But I'd
so
say
if you're trying to convince a buyer who's going to sell directly to a consumer, that's
exactly.
That's
and and the reason why I want to focus on that too is because we'll talk a bit about packaging and conveying, your messaging on shelf. But I think it can also apply to stores that aren't just grocery stores. So when we say retail, maybe you're selling your products in a gym, in a juice bar, in a hotel lobby, right? In an airport. So all of that we can lump into retail here today as well.
Great. Okay, so that's context for everybody tuning in. When we say mission meets retail, we're talking about how are you bringing that positive impact that you're trying to build into a conversation with retail buyers and then consumers. So we're going to start, of course, with the retail buyers, because you're not going to get the chance to talk to those consumers on the shelf if you didn't convince the retail buyer that your product is worth bringing into the market. So let's start there. What are you seeing in the market today in terms of attributes or claims or things about brands that retailers are really wanting to see and get more of those types of products in the store?
Yeah, I'm really excited that we're seeing buyers who are looking for more women-owned brands, certified non-GMO project certified. Of course, the classic ones, organic and fair trade and things like that. But I think those two, the women-owned and the non-GMO project certified, are the ones that we're seeing more and more. And that really excites me, right? It means that our buyers are, we can think about these buyers as gatekeepers in a way. They're really choosing to shift their product assortment towards those more values aligned brands. But, it's not every retailer. Some retailers just don't care, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's,
clarification there too from Rich in the live chat. He said, is non-GMO more than organic? Are you seeing right now?
I am. I think organic's been on the list for a long time. Right. And it's not to say that organic isn't something that they're looking for, right? Organic's still on the list, but I think we're seeing more non-GMO or we're seeing that demand rise faster than we are in organic at this point.
Right. And my context that I would add there is that non-GMO is easier to accomplish, right? You're just thinking about one thing. You're just making sure that the crops aren't grown with GMOs, right?
Yeah.
Probably overall cheaper to get those ingredients, therefore cheaper to make your product. And I think, now I'm not a retailer, I've never been not in retail, never been a buyer, et cetera. But I think there can be some price sensitivity sometimes when retailers are looking to bring products on and they're like, I don't know if our customers are going to want to pay $20 a jar for organic almond butter, but bring me some non-GMO almond butter at $12 and you got a deal, right? So my guess would be to Rich's point that organic is a priority and that would be amazing, and they would definitely take that over non-GMO if it was price comparative. But there's like a price sensitivity thing that might be going on, which boosts non-GMO a little bit higher.
Absolutely. And if we have if we have the organic certification, then we know it's non-GMO, right? So it's like organic is the gold standard there for some retailers, but it's been really interesting to see non-GMO sub in a way, almost a stepping stone towards organic, right?
And then the other attribute, or the other thing I would say that about non-GMO is that they're just way better at marketing than the organic industry. The organic industry is just like trips all over themselves. They don't know how to talk about it because it's so complex and there's so many things that go into it, whereas non-GMO gets to focus on one thing. So that's a good brand lesson right there, right? For your brand. If you're trying to communicate 20 different mission points of your brand, it's going to get lost in the mix, kind of like organic does. It's confusing. People aren't sure where to focus and how to communicate that. Whereas non-GMO, they just got to go out and pound the streets with just this one thing. Do you really want to be a science experiment with these weird biochemical or whatever bioengineered ingredients, right? So it was an easier sell. They got some consumer attention. And then, like I said, it's a bit cheaper. So I'm saying that, but
yeah. And, I think the important thing here too is that if folks are listening and they're like, oh shoot, like I don't have these certifications, I can't afford these certifications, is it worth it for me to get these certifications? I'm woman-owned, but I'm not women-owned certified. What do I do? From the buyer perspective, you can still say those things to the buyer, right? You can still say, I'm a women-owned business. I'm a Black food founder. I am, whatever it is. And those things, you can use them in your sales pitches, even if you don't have the official certification.
Right. So one thing I was going to say about what maybe retailers are looking for too is it's probably very store to store. Like I know some stores right now are just going crazy on trying to get as many regenerative brands in, and they're having regenerative brand founders come and do demos and maybe doing end caps and things like that. I also have seen waves of fair trade. Like there used to be a World Fair Trade Day where there was that we used to work on some of those campaigns where there would be whole end caps in various retailers around a bunch of different fair trade brands and educate people about what that specifically means and which certifications are better than others. And some brands are working more towards like packaging, like trying to get more sustainable packaging in the store, et cetera. So retailer to retailer, there's probably some pet babies, but like I've heard examples of some retailers won't even consider you if you don't have like this particular attribute these days, like maybe non-GMO or something like that is non-negotiable. And then everything else is a value add.
Totally.
Are there any big retailers you can think of that are like really driving hard on one specific thing that if people are looking to get into like Whole Foods, for example, or Kroger's, there's something that they're really looking for?
It's a good question because, and if you look on their websites, right, like you can go and do this research yourself, right? There is typically in the footer, or, if you want to be a vendor, click here. You can go and see what they are interested in or what the requirements are now. And they're a little vague. They're like, Whole Foods, for example, I was just looking at it earlier this week. It's like, we're looking for sustainable brands. We prefer organic brands. We're looking for regenerative brands, but they aren't coming out and saying that they're looking for one certification over another. But one of the things that I really like to do, particularly with things like Whole Foods, is look at their trends, right? They come out, they have this trend report, like the hot items of the year, Whole Foods trends, and see what they're highlighting in their trend report and some of the attributes, that the brands have. And you can, then you can use that in your sales pitches. Okay, cool. Like last year you said that buckwheat was a trend. We're using that as one of our primary ingredients. Or last year you said you were into, these 3 brands on the list that were all non-GMO certified. We are too. So while I haven't seen them come out and say, specifically, we are looking for this season, we can take those context clues and craft a sales pitch that addresses some of those things that they're highlighting.
I love that. It's a very smart and actionable strategy to see what retailers are caring about. And that also makes me feel good about, I want to say it was Whole Foods, but I remember seeing some people post on LinkedIn about upcycling being a trend multiple years over.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then one of the things that I want to hit on as well is that I'm seeing some of the larger distributors like UNFI and KeHE do programming around waiving some of the fees, like slotting fees or some of the promotional fees for brands who have certain certifications. I know that they've been doing that for women-owned certification, which is really cool. And thinking about, again, when I think about these pros and cons and the cost of the certifications and things like that, thinking about, can you get into if you're already using these partners, how can you offset the cost of the certification by taking advantage of some of those programs that they have for specific certifications. Yeah.
I love that. I love spreading the word about yummy food brands. So let's pause this conversation for a brief intro to a Latin-owned Salvadorian frozen food brand you might want to try.
Listen to that soon. That is a Santa Fruits pupusa. We've made cooking, breakfast, lunch, or dinner easy. Find our products at a freezer now near you or visit our website at winterfoods.com. XINCAFOODS.com.
All right, now let's get back to our sizzling conversation. See what I did there? Not to go too deep in this because I know we have some other topics we want to dive into, but just as a quick follow-up, we talked about some of the things retailers are looking for. Are there any red flags when it comes to mission that retailers see as I don't know about that. Like whether it's, you're way too expensive or you have too many messages, or there's certain types of impact that they're like, consumers don't really care about that, or like something like that where they see it more as a potential negative that brands should avoid heavily focusing on.
That's a great question. Here's the challenge that I see. When you're pitching those buyers, leading with the certifications, right? That is not actually what is going to get that buyer to say yes or no. So if you start your sales pitch and you're like, hey, we are I'm just going to go with this buckwheat example. We are a buckwheat snack brand, and we've got this certification, this certification, this certification. We're really delicious. We're women owned, blah, blah, blah. We'd love to be in your store. That's not what does it, right? And so often I see that these brands put all of this time and energy and money to get the certifications, which is great. But then they're using that as the key in their sales pitch when that's not what the buyer's looking for. What the buyer actually wants to know is, are you going to bring high sales to this category, right? Are you going to sell off the shelf? Are you going to help me hit my margin goals and my financial goals of the category? So sure, all the certifications are wonderful in a way. But the red flag that I see here with buyers is leading your sales pitch with the certification and not backing it up with the sales data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Like the sales data, or maybe if you're newer to wholesale and you don't have a ton of sales data, but you're still trying to pitch in, it could be leading with why the customers are going to love the product, right? Not just why will they feel good about buying it, but why is this an amazing product? Maybe leading in with some unique attributes that are product or category specific. Like, hey, you don't have a product on your shelf that has no added sugar. And we're solving that problem. Here's the data of the demand for that. Like proving the case that there's going to be a product market fit to something.
Absolutely. And I just want to dig into that for a second. And because I don't want our listeners to think we just said, talk about how delicious your product is, right? Talk about how functional your product is. What we want here is talk about how your product fits a hole in the category. Talk about and especially if you're a young product who doesn't have historical sales data, talk about the category as a whole and how your product is going to fill a need in the category, not about how delicious, tasty, sustainable.
Good note. Good clarification there. It's about the clear positioning, serving an unmet need. of course, we assume your product's delicious, and maybe
Exactly.
you'll bring some samples for the retailer so they'll know as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is that subtle difference too between the retail pitch, the wholesale pitch, and the direct to consumer pitch. Certainly direct to consumer talk about the deliciousness and the efficacy and your sustainability efforts all day long, but we're subtly shifting it here on the wholesale pitch.
Right. Okay. Great. So let's shift over and like once you convince the buyer and they're giving you a chance and they put you on shelf, usually you have a limited amount of time to succeed on shelf and perform well, or you don't get renewed or you don't get refilled, etc. So that's where you need to convince the consumer. So that's where things like, good packaging, good quality of taste of your product, maybe price promotion, other things like that. But to focus specifically around mission, since that's the point of our call, what are you seeing right now in terms of data, information, or anecdotes or whatever around what kind of change consumers are driving? What kind of attributes are consumers demanding at store and actually showing up and paying for, not just saying they want and then getting to retail and saying, I don't want to pay that much more for it.
Well, so that's the key point here, right? And I hate saying this, but I don't know if it's actually translating to sales. I think that studies show there's a big difference between what consumers say they want and where they want to spend, put their money where their values are, and when it actually translates to the retail shelf. And it's a shame. And I'm not exactly sure how we measure this, but I think there's a disconnect, right? If we survey our audiences and we talk to people, everybody says, oh yeah, I value certified B Corp. I value organic. I value local products. But when we actually put them in the grocery store, we're not necessarily seeing that translate to sales. Right.
And especially I would say, like, if that's what you're hanging your hat on, but your product's just okay, or your product is 2 or 3 times more expensive or something, then they might actually want that and value it. They just can't justify paying 2x for it. They can't justify having a bad food experience just to buy that attribute, right? So I think it's got to be more than just that attribute. Yeah,
absolutely. And one of the things that, no matter what attribute it is or what claim you're making, the thing that I am seeing consumers value is transparency. So what the heck am I buying? Where is it coming from? Who's producing it? Why should I care? And it's not so much about specific attributes because it's so dependent consumer to consumer, retailer to retailer, right? There's just so much variance there. It's more about transparency in what's going on. Why do I care about this brand? Who's making it? Where is it from? What are the ingredients? All of that.
Right. And to add a little actual research into this, and again, how much research proves versus what actions actually get taken on shelf is, not always the same. So take these insights and think about how they actually apply. But there was a study done by Fortune magazine about kind of sustainability in consumers and what's driving change within or what's actually driving consumers to buy products based on sustainability. And I'm just going to read this and then we can talk about it. I pulled a quote from it. It says, "While we found that an articulation of the core attributes alone would be appealing to 44% of the potential target audience," and that just means like, hey, we're sugar-free or something like that, right? "Adding 2 additional sustainability claims tied to the core attribute drives increased appeal by 24 and 33 percentage points to an average of 74% across the 9 brands." So it's a pretty big jump in demand there. And they say the most compelling claims would be good for your skin, good for the planet, tastes great because we partner with local farmers for 100% sustainable sourcing, etc. So the kind of article goes on to explain that a little bit more. But what they found essentially is that products or consumers are mostly in a what's in it for me mindset when it comes to purchasing, right? So first off, if your product is like, skincare, obviously it should be
really good at taking care of their skin and
Right.
hopefully not poisoning them would be some of your sustainability claims. Like A, hey, this gets rid of your wrinkles instantly, right? Whatever. And then B, and you're not going to die because it's EWG certified or something like that, right? That would be a good claim. If it's food, it might be, hey, this product is sugar free, so you're not going to get diabetes by eating this all the time. But it also is locally sourced from farms in your region, and therefore it's better quality and takes care of your own area, or specifically like, maybe toxin free, so it's good for your whole family, or allergen free, so it's good for your kids, like, or other kind of me first. Like, and by me, I mean, how is it impacting me, my family, my community? Those are the things that are going to be a better driver for purchase, whereas this supports farmers across the world, or this reduces carbon by, 20%, which are these things that are hard for consumers to grasp and hard for them to understand and hard for them to see the immediate benefit to them. So I thought that was an interesting article because it gave you kind of a target to shoot for. I think Rich was making a point of you don't necessarily want to scatter your front panel with a bunch of different logos because that'll confuse people. So when you're thinking about the logos, think about what are the primary product attributes that I need to communicate, which are positioning, like we were talking about. What's the unmet need? Make that prominent and clear and compelling on the front. And then if you have some impact mission, some sustainability claims, probably put the ones on the front that are the most what's in it for me. And then the ones on the back, let's just say like B Corp, 1% for the planet. Great things. I'm certified by both, but I rarely put that on the front of somebody's package because that's more of a, hey, read this later when you're at home. It's going to make you feel good about the purchase after you fall in love with it. It's probably not going to drive the purchase. So focusing on those, what's in it for them, their family, their community up front on the front panel is what I would say.
Yeah. I think it can get overwhelming when you've got all the claims going on, whether that's on the front or the back, right? I recently saw coconut water that was certified gluten-free. And I just kind of rolled my eyes at that because I'm like, the one ingredient is coconut water. And I'm like, interesting. So they went through all the trouble, all the expense of getting certified gluten-free. And it really got me thinking, okay, is there an audience here of celiac folks or, people who are choosing to eat gluten-free who are concerned about their coconut water containing gluten? I don't know, right? Like, I just don't know. But it struck me as, a little excessive on a product like that. Right.
Yeah. Those claims just to have a claim
that's what
are always confusing to me. Right. But to some degree, I get it. But there's like certain audiences that are lazy and won't do the work. And then there's certain audiences that will do the work. So for example, if you have a really bad allergy, you're probably used to flipping over packages to look at ingredient panels, et cetera. So like, sure, if allergen free is your main differentiator, put that on the front of the package. If it's like sugar is your main differentiator, but you happen to be allergen free, maybe that goes on the back panel because that audience is going to look at your back panel no matter what. Even if you say you're allergen free, they're still going to look at the back panel because they don't know if that means their specific allergy, right? So they're always going to look at it. So that could give you a reason to go ahead and just put it on the back and feature something else on the front.
Yeah. And I think about it in where my brain goes is the category set, like on the physical shelf, right? I think, Kimberly's here with Bake Me Healthy. And I think about Kimberly's baking mixes that are top 9 allergy free. And thinking about that traditional consumer who's looking at that baking shelf and they're like, this isn't really a category that is so friendly to me. It's not a category that I spend much time in. And having that, top 9 allergy free front and center on the packaging is so key in a traditional set that wouldn't historically be safe for someone with those allergies to shop.
Exactly. So it's a great positioning for her in that there aren't that many top 9 allergen-free baking mixes probably, right? So that's a great unmet need.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. So, but in terms of like what are consumers driving like outside of that article, like I see so many studies of what consumers care about, and it's
Yeah.
pretty much always at the top of the list. It's like taste, quality, performance, whatever. So like you've got to have a good product first. Okay, that's got to be number one. And on your packaging, you probably don't want your product to look gross, right? So that's something that I think some new brands miss, is the photo on their package just isn't very appetizing. Like the coloring or the way they shot the photo, the lighting, the food styling or whatever doesn't look appetizing. Or maybe they decide to put a window on their package, but in distribution, the product breaks apart a little bit, melts, or the sauce gets on the window, and then it just kind of looks gross on shelf. Like taste being number one, are people going to buy that product? Doesn't matter what claims you put on the package. If it looks gross, or if they know it's not good because they've tried it before, they're not going to come and buy it. So
100%.
let's just call that groundwork, right?
Yep.
And
Great
then
product
after,
is number one, right?
yeah. And then after you nail those things, then it's like a whole laundry list. It depends on the consumer of whether allergens or GMOs or organic or regenerative or whatever matters. But those things do matter to like 70 plus. I don't have the specific data, but like I think I've seen like 70 to 80% of consumers are looking for sustainability attributes. So having something on your package is beneficial. You just need to figure out what to put on the front panel. And again, I would say it's what your brand is all about, like your positioning, and what your consumers care about most. Put those on the front of the package. All the other things that you as a company care about, that you do for the world, donating a little bit of profits here, or some meals to this person, or B Corp, or paying your employees, well, that's all back panel stuff, and our website, social media.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the mistakes that I see here is that I often see founders who are so attached to their mission, right? And that's a wonderful thing. But
that's why they started it.
Right. That's why they started it. But they're so attached to it, and they think that that's why consumers are buying their products as well. And there's a disconnect where most of the marketing, or at least like the front and center marketing, is all about the mission instead of what you said, what it's going to do for the consumer. And I think we've got a big missed opportunity here, and a big mistake here. Unless we're flip-flopping that, right? Leading with what it's doing for the consumer, and then they get on board with the mission.
And I would say that's probably an attribute of founders that are newer to this industry, or new founders in general. And the reason they got into this, the reason they even created a brand, is because they cared so much about something specific, right? They cared about creating a more nutritious protein bar or whatever, because all the food in the vending machines is crap. I was just interviewing BTR Nation, Better Nation, on the podcast yesterday.
Retail Ready alumni. Yeah, Ashley, she's great.
So like she found a problem that was like really, for lack of a better word, pissed her off. And she's like, why is there no good food in this vending machine? I'm going to solve this problem so my family can have better food, so other people can have better food. So that when you're that obsessed with that mission, then to your point, you start to maybe assume everyone else is equally obsessed or should be equally obsessed, and you just toot that horn, or you talk about that over and over again without pausing to say, okay, well, that's what I really care about right now, but where, again, we keep talking about this, where is the unmet need in the market that is actually a demand? Because if you come out with something that people don't know they need, let's just go back to the era of cricket protein proliferating, but like Pat Crowley with Chapool, like he worked his butt off to try to get people to want to eat crickets, right? Yeah. But it was an uphill battle, just rolling that boulder up the hill, and difficult to convince
That's a hard
them.
one.
And maybe if he had 10, 20 years in him to keep pounding like Mike Fata from Manitoba Harvest, and like wait for the industry to catch up and realize, hey, hemp is actually a really good food product, and maybe we should make it legal to grow and sell and all this other kind of stuff. That takes time when you're driving consumer demand. For new entrepreneurs who don't have tons of resources or don't want to wait 20 years, you need to find an existing consumer demand and really dial that in and communicate that about your product. And again, since we're talking about mission, that's probably going to be something like allergen free or made with better ingredients or takes better care of people or is healthier, something like that, right? You're doing something to make people on the planet better. And that's going to be your focus, but make sure when you're talking about those things, especially front panel, that you're talking first about the things that the consumer is already wanting, and then you can educate them on things they should care about on the back panel, on your social media, on your website.
Absolutely. Another example that comes to mind is past Retail Ready student Anjali of Anjali's Cup. She makes beautiful turmeric products and chai concentrate. And she swore up and down that the most important thing about her Resilience turmeric elixir was that she was sourcing her turmeric from farmers in Hawaii, and that the turmeric was never heated. And apparently, like most turmeric is heated in the processing, and it, kills off, or, for lack of a better word, kills off most of the like beneficial properties of turmeric. And so she swore that like that was what made her product so incredible. And so for years, she led with that in her marketing because she cared so much about that. It was so important for her to work with these small Hawaiian farmers and source this turmeric and have it processed in a particular way. And through careful examination, she realized that her audience didn't actually care about that. That didn't make a difference to them. What they
or maybe
cared
they would
about,
care if they had any idea why. But like it's expensive and time consuming to educate people on all the reasons why that's important.
Exactly, and she still talks about it, but it's not front and center anymore. What's front and center is how delicious it is, how effective the product is, how the consumer feels better when they're consistently drinking that turmeric elixir. And it's really been a beneficial shift for her to realize that the thing that she cared most about as the founder wasn't the thing that her audience cared most about.
And I haven't put a lot of thought into this before saying it, so correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe if you do want to lean in on a very nerdy detail about, some small attribute of food quality or something like that like, hey, I'm all for like keeping nutrients in the product. That makes total sense to me, right?
Yep.
But like consumers don't know enough about what a plant even looks like when it's growing your food, let alone like the processing of food in order to retain nutrients. So that's going to be a hard sell. However, I'm sure there's some really educated foodies out there who do really care about nutrient density and they're trying to find better stuff. So maybe if that's what she wanted the brand to be about, it needed to be a direct-to-consumer play to a very niche audience where you're going to sell a premium product at a higher margin to very few people. And it's just going to, the goal then is just to find that niche rather than trying to go mainstream.
Yeah. Inside of Retail Ready, we talk about it as the core, the crowd, and the halo concept, thinking about who is that, the tiniest, most loyal audience. What do they care about in your brand? And then who, as we get larger, as we get more experienced in marketing, as we gain more distribution or points of sale, we can start expanding into that crowd and then the halo. But we really have to nail down the core first, because they're going to become, the repeat purchasers, the brand ambassadors, the forever fans of our products.
Yeah, and I think so often the theory is like if you really nail the core, it'll expand out to the halo, etc.
Exactly.
But I would also maybe argue not every attribute that a core cares about is going to expand out to the halo or jump the chasm to the mainstream. By which I mean, Liquid Death is a popular example these days of they really understood their core of people in the music industry or going to concerts that didn't want to drink booze the entire time and maybe wanted to drink some water and hydrate, but didn't want to look like a nerd holding an Evian bottle or whatever, right? They wanted to hold something that looked cool. So like they made a cool looking water can that looks kind of like a craft beer. Yeah. They understood that core audience, but that's also like a image, kind of a cool emotional, like people want to look cool to their friends. That will jump the chasm to the mainstream. Whereas if it's a nerdy, like, hey, I just processed this food in a slightly different way, and it's like more of an intellectual, like you have to kind of do some research or educate yourself to understand the benefit of that. And it's not necessarily an emotional thing. That's probably not going to jump the halo. It's going to take a lot of education, a lot of policy, a lot of other things. So maybe thinking about that when you're picking your attribute and where you're focusing.
Agree. I also just want to address Richard's comment here. He said, I think founders have a lot of anecdotal evidence of shoppers looking for specific claims, right? Maybe you're doing demos. Maybe you're getting DMs on social media. Maybe, you have a post-purchase survey that's giving you this feedback. And I hate being such a naysayer here, but I'm always so curious about what do people say to founders' faces, right, at a demo? And then what behavior do they take or not take? What do they do or not do when it's just themselves in a grocery aisle? I don't know. It's fascinating to me.
Right. And it goes back to your point earlier of like what people say they'll do versus what they'll actually do. And I think that's part of the problem with a lot of consumer research and stuff too, is that even in a focus group or whatever, like people are kind of often saying what they think the researcher wants them to say, or they're speaking from a who they wish they were standpoint, right? Like, oh, if I want to be a more healthy person, yes, I would totally buy these kale chips. And then when it comes down to it, they're looking at the store and they're like, potato chips or kale chips? And they're like, potato chips. I've had a rough day. I'm going to treat myself, right?
Yeah, so or like, $9.99 versus $4.99. You know, I'm looking at everything else I've got in my shopping cart here. We're going with the $4.99 purchase.
Right. Love that. So one other thing I wanted to touch on is based on all of this, I don't know if I'm supposed to call it a theory. I got called out recently on LinkedIn for saying something was a theory instead of anecdote, or I don't know, not an anecdote. I'm spacing on the word I was supposed to use. But anyway, I'm going to just call it a theory.
Maybe?
But,
is this your philosophy?
Yeah, something like that. But it's a brand loyalty funnel is what I'm going to kind of describe here. And this is what I believe to be true, and then you can tell me if it reflects your experience as well. So, and this is coming from somebody who really, really cares about mission. My whole business is built around mission. My whole career is built around making a positive impact, right? So, but I would say that's lower in the funnel. So the funnel, in my mind, goes for a product at retail. You need clear and compelling packaging first that gets them to try your product. And by clear, I mean they need to know what that positioning is. They need to know what's good about it. You know, again, back to those like 1, product claim and 2 sustainability claims. Get really clear on that. Like, why should they care about this product? Why is it different, et cetera? And then compelling is, why should they care about you versus someone else? Where's like the emotion there? Does it look really delicious? And they're like, oh my God, I have to try that. Does it look really cool? Does it speak to them as a human? Does it kind of reflect some of their values visually or whatever else, right? So like, get the words right, get the visuals and the perception right, so that people just have to try it. Because of course, at that point, unless you're demoing, they haven't tried it yet. They don't know if it's good. You've got to make them want to try it first, right? So clear and compelling packaging is the best way to do that. Of course, there's other strategies, promotions, et cetera, but we're just talking about a neutral environment where there's no staff person telling you, you got to try this. So that's number 1, just clear and compelling packaging. And then second layer of the filter is product quality. Once they get it home and they try it, does it taste as good as they hoped? Does it function as well as they hoped? Does it, I don't know, like, is it easy to use? Like if it's a MCT powder, does it actually blend into their beverage easily, or does it clump up and it's kind of awkward and difficult to drink or something like that, right? So the function, the quality, the taste, etc. If that's good, then they're going to be like, you know what? That was pretty good. I'm going to try it again, assuming it's affordable and they can't afford to try it again. It wasn't a special one-off purchase. They're like, great, I'm going to go buy it again. And then when they buy it again and they keep liking it, that starts building some brand trust. And then where it starts turning into full brand loyalty, that's when you have these mission attributes. It's not only does it a good product, but they feel good about buying it. They feel good about supporting your brand. You reach them at a deeper emotional level when they're like, hey, I love this product, but it's also really good for people on the planet. They're going to start becoming like a brand ambassador for you and telling all their friends. And even if a competitor at that point launches almost an identical product to yours that tastes just as good, performs just as good, and is the same price, they're going to stick with you because they feel better about buying your product than that competitor's. And maybe they'll even start to kind of build their identity around your product the way Apple users do, or the way people did with Tom's shoes in the beginning, right? Or the Prius for a while, right? It becomes conspicuous consumption where they're almost buying it because it said something about themselves.
Totally.
So that's where I see the filter is you got to nail the clear and compelling packaging, have a good product that makes them want to come back, and then have that great mission or story or whatever piece that they want to tell everyone else about and feel good about rebuying and supporting your brand and being loyal to you.
Yeah.
So how does that sit with you?
That lands with me. So my brain goes to like 3 P's. We've got our packaging, we've got our product, and then we've got our purpose. And it's got to go in that order, right? Because if we think about this crowded retail shelf, how are we driving trial? How are we capturing the attention? It's not the deliciousness of the product. It's not what's in the packaging itself. We've got to get them to make that initial purchase. That has to happen with packaging, right? In the retail environment, that has to happen with clear, compelling packaging. The product, they get home, it meets or exceeds their expectations, right? The product satisfies in a way, and that's what's going to convince them to become a repeat purchaser, right? And then you layer in that purpose, and that's where they feel the deep emotional connection. Yeah, I like that. I support your theory.
And I forget what the criticism was. There was something like you have to have like scientific evidence, or I don't know. There's like something between like theory versus hypothesis versus I'm spacing on the word I was supposed to use. It made sense at the time. I'm like, I should question how I'm using that word, but anyway,
we can just call it a framework, right? This is your framework that you believe to be true.
Or I'll just call it a funnel without it being a theory, because we'll just say it's proved now. Alli agrees. It's evidence.
And well, I think about it, we're going to do our own scientific method here. If we tried it from the bottom up, right, where we're really leading with the mission, we're leading with our purpose, we're trying to get people on board because of our mission statement. I don't want to say it never works, but it's so much harder in the traditional retail environment. Yeah, maybe if we're talking direct to consumer, or we're doing, I don't know, if we already are a brand, right? Like Patagonia launching their food line, right? If we've already got a clear mission that we are globally known for, that's a different story. Right. But if we're talking about traditional retail, the packaging has to come first, and the product sits squarely in the middle there. Yeah.
And that's where, as the mission-driven brand experts or whatever, like you can find ways to weave that into the packaging, and still highlight the primary, product attributes, etc. And it kind of depends on the category and who your competitors are. Like, if your main differentiator and the niche you're filling in the market is a more sustainable product, and there's a consumer out there that's like wishing they could buy a good quality X thing, but it's more sustainable, then great. You could probably elevate that higher on your package, but you still have to be clear about the core product attributes too, because they're not going to buy it only because of their mission. They want to have the baseline check marks done first, and then they'll buy you because you're positioned as the more sustainable product, right? But
totally.
With that said, you just got to have the function.
Totally. I had a founder send me some product. I'm not going to say what it was, but they sent me a product a couple weeks ago, and the packaging was bad. Just not appealing. Not appealing. The product itself was incredible. It's one of the best new products that I have tried in ages. My husband and I were both just like, eating it straight from the packaging. So wonderful. The packaging was awful. And so I think about this, like, I am so hooked on this product now. I'm ready to order it direct from the brand, right? I'm going on their website and placing that direct order. But if I were in a retail environment, I never would have
tried it.
Never. And how sad, because it's incredible. It's an incredible product line. So
as a designer, that hurts my heart. But then also I would flip it the other way. My heart also gets broken when I get really excited because there's a really cool package, a really cool brand, and then I try the product. I'm like, this just isn't very good, or the texture, or the taste, or the, something. Or like for me, I've got a pet peeve against like some of the alternative sugars. Like they just taste weird in my mouth and leave like a kind of weird feeling in my throat. And I'll be like, oh, this product looks great. I'm like trying it. I'm like, first taste, I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. And then like, this flavor in the back of my throat and mouth just starts getting icky and I can't do it anymore. And like, those are the products where I'm like, damn it, I really wanted to love that.
Right. And in my experience, we're seeing more of this. We're seeing, I don't want to say it's, I'm hesitant to say this. So it's with a big asterisk, that it is easier than ever to create a visual brand, right? Where you've got like flashy enough packaging, you've got a social presence, you have a website, you can like superficially create an attractive brand. Right. And so I think we're seeing this more and more where these brands are like starting out of the gate with a more professional appearance, and then the product just isn't matching. Exactly. Yeah.
So either way, like if your product is amazing, but your brand isn't as good, get your brand fixed so that your brand is as good as your product. If your product is, or your brand is amazing, but your product is so-so, get your product fixed. Because, and I guess of those two categories, it's hard to say which one I'd rather be, but I would for sure rather be a good product, because once people do try you, they'll buy you again. Whereas if it's a bad product, no matter how good the brand is, you might have reformulated a year later. I'm probably not going to go try it again. You'd have to like really convince me somehow that this is going to be better this time. And it's going to be hard because that brand trust is broke. So like from a branding standpoint, it's better to have like a over deliver with a crappy brand and a good product, and then later update your brand, than have a great brand but a crappy product and you just burn the bridge with all those initial consumers.
Yes, but the packaging has to be like the very best version that you can as soon as possible, right? Because we're not going to
start with the product, then down the brand. Don't start with the brand, then have a crappy product. Yeah,
exactly. But my fear, it's so heartbreaking to see really incredible products, really passionate producers, values-driven products, mission-driven products not succeed on the retail shelf because of subpar packaging. Right. We see it all the time. So unfortunately, you got to find a way to have both pretty quick in your in your product.
Ideally,
launch.
You're hitting the market day one with amazing product and a great brand, but that's not realistic for all brands. It depends on money and expertise and all that kind of stuff. But that makes sense. And I see that we're basically at time here, so I'm just going to say we'll wrap it up there. I think great conversation around where mission meets retail, what kind of attributes retailers are looking for, what kind of attributes consumers are looking for, tips on how to make sure that you're communicating the right message to both retailers and consumers, and then some ideas around brand loyalty funnel and what kind of attributes you should wear on your package or whatever. So really great conversation there. And I just want to say thank you for coming on and experimenting on this live with me and sharing your expertise with the live LinkedIn audience. And then we'll also publish this through the podcast. And I know you've got a huge podcast database. So as we wrap up, why don't you say, where can people find out more about you and get some resources that you've created?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. This was my very first LinkedIn Live, and it was such a pleasure to do it with you, and really appreciate that it goes on the podcast as well. So if you're listening on the podcast, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm at Alli Ball or Food Biz Wiz. And then our entire podcast library of 250 episodes is found on any podcast player. It's Food Biz Wiz. And then, of course, I love hanging out on Instagram. I probably shouldn't say that on LinkedIn, but that's where I'm most active.
Earmuffs, LinkedIn, earmuffs.
Yeah, exactly. Come and find me on Instagram. I'm at Food Biz Wiz. And if you're listening, send me a DM. I'll send you some, resources, and I'll direct you to where you can go in that library of 250 podcast episodes, because it's big. But thank you for having me. This was really
It's an
fun.
Epic library of content. So thanks for creating that and keeping it live for folks. And for those on LinkedIn who don't follow the podcast, you can find our podcast at Brands for a Better World. Any podcast platform. We were formerly known as Evolve CPG, so you can still search that, I believe, and we'll show up as well. Or you can go to our website, modernspecies.com, where we have the database of podcasts there too, and links to the videos, and we're on YouTube as well, so you can find us there. So, or of course, if you need help creating compelling brand messaging and packaging, etc., you can find us at modernspecies.com. All right. That was awesome. So thanks again, and we'll go ahead and wrap up there.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about Alli Ball, her course, community, or podcast, go to alliball.com. ALLIBALL.com. If you like this show, remember to help us grow by liking, reviewing, and sharing. If you're new here, don't forget we have over 100 episodes in the archive. Some might be called Evolve CPG, but it's the same show, so dig in for more goodness. If you consider yourself an impact-driven professional, join me over at impactdriven.community, where we're supporting each other's growth as impact leaders.